Thank you for coming to this webinar today, a recipe for successful cooking workshop. I'm Muriel Vrens. I'm working as a project manager for quiterre, which is based in Quebec. And I'm here with Juliana D. Quinzo. She's a dietitian at the English Montreal School Board based here in Montreal. So we'll go over some technical. Oh, sorry. Just before starting, we just go on some technical details. So just let you know that for the audio, if you do encounter some problems, you have two options. You can listen to the audio from your computer or from your phone. And if you want to ask questions, you can do that like during the entire webinar. There's like different options. On your screen, there's a question box that you can use for question. There's also a chat box, and you can also use at the question period at the end of the webinar. You can use the little sign to raise your hand, and you can ask your question directly. And if you do have different technical problem, here is the number you can contact. This project is really a rich partnership. The practical guide was developed by different partners, the Montreal School Board, the Direction Santé Publique de Montréal, quiterre, as well as the Dairy Farmers of Canada. So it was really a rich complementary of different actors. And for this webinar, we really want to thank Sustain Ontario to organize to have this webinar happen. So thank you very much, as well as the Farm to Cafeteria Canada through the Farm to School Canada Digs In initiatives. So thank you very much. So we just want to ask you 4 different questions in order to best understand where you're from and what do you do. So if we go with the first question, in which province, from which province are you from? So either Quebec, Ontario, Western Canada, Eastern Canada, or either territories or outside Canada. So you can answer in the question it shows at your screen. So we see here the answers. So a big majority from Ontario as well. After that, as well as from Western Canada, so BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. After from Eastern Canada, and a few from Quebec. So thank you from people from all around Canada. So question 2, what is your position? So either manager or a teacher, daycare worker, either for schools or preschools. 3, nutritionist, dietitian, sorry, or nutrition advisor, a representative of an organization or other. So the big majority is either nutritionist or nutrition advisor, and after that, NGO, an organization, few manager, teacher, and daycare worker. Question 3, we wanted to ask you if applicable, like within your function, your position, have you ever run a culinary workshop? So either yes or no, or not applicable. So great, a big majority of persons have run a culinary workshop in the past, so great. And so our last question, we just want to ask you if you have already read the guide and download it. So either yes and no. So great. So big majority say no. So we'll go over the guide with you today. So I think this will give you a nice overview of it and to really be more friendly with the guide. So we'll go into the training on the proper use of this guide. And just in introduction, this guide was part of a project named School State Route in Quebec. We wanted to, like in this project, we wanted to get children and their families to increase the consumption of fruits and vegetables for different reasons, to educate the young, to encourage our economy and local producer, as well as to protect the environment. And we have identified 3 different methods. The first one was to run fundraising campaigns with fresh, organic, and local vegetables with local farmers. The second one was the promoting of cooking workshop. And the last one was to offer snacks in school. So the first aspect, the fundraising campaign, we do run it now for 3 years. We've started in 2016 with 2 schools, and in the fall of 2018, we did it in 75 schools and daycares all across Canada, and we sold about 7,500 baskets, all local and organic. So it was a big success. And we did this really with different partners, as I mentioned, for this. So Quiterre, le système alimentaire montréalais, la direction de la santé publique de Montréal, la commission scolaire de Montréal, the Dairy Farmers of Canada, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture in Quebec, Québec en forme, l'Université de Montréal, and la direction régionale as well du ministère, the Ministry of Agriculture in Quebec. So this is an overview of the first aspect, and I let Juliana take the lead for the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, the other way.
Wait, yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, so hi everybody. Thank you for being here today, and hopefully this will be very fruitful for you today in terms of introducing the guide. So just the introduction of the guide and training session was evaluated as part of a pilot project in 2017-2018, and this was done by Marie-Pierre Drolet, who is a dietitian of the Commission Scolaire de Montréal. So she did a very good job. And to accomplish this process, 3 schools from the CSDM was reached. So they received the guide. She gave a training session on how to use the guide and the required culinary equipment to animate the activities. And here are some of the highlights of the evaluations, which was quite impressive. 96% of the participants planned on making changes and organizing workshops. 100% of participants who did not offer it before intended on using the guide, so which demonstrated the effectiveness of having a training of the guide. And 2 months after the training, 38% of the participants used the guide. 80% of the participants intended on using the guide at a later time. Nutrition Month seemed to be one of those times that nutrition plays a vital role in implementing cooking workshops. 94% of the participants said they would continue to use the guide. And very important to mention, if you see at the bottom of this slide, they noticed some very positive changes, which is what we were looking for. More consumption of fruits and vegetables, follow up with parents being more involved, and also better planification of cooking workshops, which made it easy. So we'll just, on the next page here, on this page you'll find the authors of the guide, financial supporters, as well as other collaborators involved in the revision of the guide. So it's different dietitians from different school boards, educational consultants, as well as teachers, etc., which you can take a look at. So let us begin. So when it comes to this guide, it was designed for school daycare services, but it can be used by others who work in elementary schools or also work with elementary school age students or children, teachers in a classroom or other settings, community centers, or also daycare centers. Doing workshops with elementary age school children is an excellent way to instill healthy eating habits. It allows them to discover and learn appropriate ways of eating, to get more knowledge about food, develop and practice cooking skills, which is also with the launch, and it coincides with the launch of the new Canada's Food Guide, which focuses on variety, but also on cooking skills. And so the earlier they start, the more they will provide them with lifelong benefits. For example, as simple as peeling carrots, for example, and associate healthy eating with fun and self-fulfillment and joy, which is also very, very important. And we also found that cooking workshops can also lead to the acquisition of cross-curricular, subject-specific competencies. So it can be with math, language. It's very, very, very broad in terms of learning objectives. On the next page here, we can appreciate how animating workshops is an excellent way to promote healthy eating habits. So when foods are introduced in a positive manner, focusing more on the joy and cooking nutritious foods without labeling food as good or bad, we want to instill that foods are not labeled as good or bad, rather than looking at food as a whole. Emphasize your discussions and discoveries on whole, minimally processed foods, whole grain, fruits and vegetables. Identify other foods that maybe they're not maybe used to, like legumes and different types of dairy products, and not only on isolated nutrients. Help children understand and respect hunger and satiety signals. So we try to teach kids to eat when they're hungry and to stop when they're full, and we try to teach them how to identify these signals. And then also to choose foods that are good for the economy and good for the environment. So on this page here, at a glance, serves as a table of contents, which can be used throughout the planning process. And in this training, we'll briefly overview the main steps of the guide. So in addition to the step-by-step guide, there are also fact sheets and practical tools, and these are located in the back pocket of the guide, if you have it. And there are 7 fact sheets, numbered 1 to 7, and practical tools A, B, and C, and D. And when referenced, they're identified by the icons, which you'll see in this 1 or the A. And these are very practical. They coincide, they complement the cooking workshops by giving you other information. So when it comes to the planning, so all the necessary steps in terms of budget, equipment, location, dates, and workflow, all these encompass to make sure that it's smooth and it's a smooth process, encourages the variety of recipes used, establishes concrete and varied learning objectives depending on what you're trying to teach the children, whether it be technique, skills, or knowledge about food, allows the sharing of materials, saving time, increased chances of success, and then allows the animator to be more prepared and more comfortable in the animation of the cooking workshops. So when planning cooking workshops, the first 2 things to consider on this page are the budget. Allocating the budget beforehand will determine the frequency of cooking workshops, as well as the recipes and ingredients that you'll be needing. And choosing a location. Choose a location that will facilitate the cooking workshop. Having a sink always makes it easier when it comes to teaching cleanliness and having to wash the equipment and cleaning the location after you've done the workshop. And also ensure that children are comfortable and safe and follow safety rules. The next page shows 2 examples of setups, which can be used according to the chosen method. The top can be used for smaller groups. The second idea can be used for more bigger groups where the ingredients is placed in the center of the table. And these are just examples of setups. So depending on your situation in your classroom, there are other possible arrangements. We just want to make sure that we're able to see all the children to ensure their safety, to be able to accompany them, to be able to circulate between them should they need any help. And this is all to ensure a smooth flow of the workshop. Other practical tips. It's important to get the parents involved. Parents that are involved are more likely to continue this process in cooking at home with their children. So inform the parents of upcoming cooking workshops, for example, by sending a letter that children may be picked up, sending them a letter so that the children could be picked up at the end of the activity. And we've also provided a practical tool B, which is templates for letters to parents, which I'll show you in a little bit. And this could be photocopied or completed by hand or directly on the PDF version on the computer and printed out. And this is an example of templates for letters you can review at a later time. And this is another example. And also, when considering practical tips, the next step is the frequency and reoccurrence to make prevention and health promotion interventions more effective. So it is therefore recommended that you gradually increase the frequency of cooking workshops in order to positively impact and meet your learning objectives. The next step to you is to use Cooking Workshops calendar to decide on recipe themes. This will help you choose a variety of recipes and in turn expand what the children learn. So here at the bottom of the page, choose your theme, focusing mostly on minimally or non-processed foods, staple foods. Pig recipes are very simple at the beginning of the year, and as they become more experienced, you can make the recipe a little more complex. And set learning objectives. Example, how to safely use a knife to cut vegetables. You can find examples of learning objectives in fact sheet number 1, which is child development through cooking workshop, and also on page 22 of the guide. So this is a calendar, displays the different themes that you could use for each month. At the bottom of the page, there's the little legends. So the circle represents the theme, the triangle is the recipe, and the square is referring to the learning objective. So for example, in September, it's the start of the school. You can focus on the harvest season. October can be featuring apples. In November, you can explore how to use the pumpkin after Halloween to show other ways of using a pumpkin in an effort to avoid food waste. In December, it's the holiday season. It's festive, so you can use beets for its festive color. In January, it's very cold. As we know, in Montreal, it's very, very cold today. So a nice soup to warm up is very, very enticing. Also, for example, when choosing a theme, you don't necessarily have to be linked to the time of year. For example, the calendar proposes in the month of February to discover legumes, which are rich in proteins and fibers, economic and simple to preserve and cook, and their production has less environmental impact. You can also consider learning objectives from the moment of planning. Some examples of objectives can be how to use a strainer. Some kids don't know how to do that, how to properly and safely use a knife when cutting vegetables. So the objectives can also focus on developing fine motor skills, using equipment, scissors to cut fine herbs. And also want to mention, it's also important to keep the equipment simple and easy to use. Equipments that they have at home that they're familiar with, because if it's a commercial equipment that's too complex or too bulky or too massive, the students may not know how to use it and less likely to participate. So other suggested learning objectives can also be found on page 22 and 40 of the guide, as well as on fact sheet number 1. So this is an example of a cooking workshop calendar. So you focus on the theme, the recipe, and also the learning objectives on what you hope to achieve by animating this cooking workshop. And on the other side of the page gives you themed ideas, some inspiration if you need. It provides this also on the guide. Another tool also available on the Equiterre's website. Additional information or tools have been developed by the Schools Take Project, the Schools Take Root project. You can refer to the Quebec Seasonal Produce Calendar Fruits and Vegetables and recipe cards when planning your calendar of cooking workshops. So this is pretty cool because it allows you to you can plan your recipes based on what's available in season. This is just a little guide. And on next page, Equiterre, there are recipe cards for 50 Quebec fruits and vegetables that have been developed. On the front, it gives information, a description of the food. And on the reverse side, there's 2 recipes, one requiring no cooking, which can be adapted for cooking workshops, and one requiring cooking that can be done in future cooking workshops or can be suggested to parents. Pages 14 to 17 of the guide, it demonstrates the equipment needed to carry out cooking workshops. So you have pictures of what the child may need to animate the cooking workshop, for the group, depending on how you're deciding to set up the workshop, for the facilitator. Also some good ideas, depending on the equipment and the time available, you may decide to choose recipes requiring no cooking. There are many no cooking recipes that are very quick to make and require little equipment. However, just keep in mind the recipes that require cooking provide an opportunity to taste different foods and develop diverse cooking skills. So for many recipes, a microwave, toaster, oven, or a hot plate will suffice. By starting with the basic culinary skills and gradually increasing the complexity of the task, students will become progressively more skilled, become proud of what they've achieved and what they're capable of doing, and become more efficient throughout the year. So properly managing and organizing cooking workshops using the proper equipment will obviously avoid delays and allow the workshops to run more smoothly. So now, just as at a glance, we've completed the first section of annual planning of cooking workshops. We'll move on to the next section, which is group management planning. So when it comes to group management planning, keep in mind that children need guidance in learning proper behaviors and what is expected of them. So teaching the proper etiquette and behavior is much like teaching math. You name, you demonstrate the proper behavior, and also be a good role model and allow the children to practice. So for example, washing the hands, when they cough and sneeze into their elbows and not in front of everybody, and to ensure that they're washing their hands the proper way. And of course, through constant, as we know, working with children, through constant repetition and demonstration of what is accepted and what is the proper behavior, eventually children will learn and adopt the proper behavior as well. And so some of the principles include name the expected behavior, demonstrate visually. You can have an older child demonstrate to a younger child, be a good role model, and allow the child to demonstrate the behavior. Give them a chance, the opportunity to develop their skills. Here on this page lists the behavior expectations that is expected, which you can read on your own time. For example, before, making sure that they wash their hands, remove all jewelry. So what is expected of them during the workshop, when sampling the food, after the workshop, and what is expected of them at all times. And these are facts. The next couple of pages is fact sheet number 5. These are hygiene and food safety procedures, and it is a quick guide to food safety rules that must be followed throughout the cooking to ensure food safety for the children. And of course, this can also be applied at home when they go back home to their parents. So it's before cooking, during cooking, after the cooking workshop, and it gives you a quick demonstration of how to properly wash the hands. Establishing a workflow of the cooking workshop. Well, when presenting cooking workshops in a predetermined workflow, whereby children become familiar with the steps, this will encourage them to exercise independence and permit the workshops to run more smoothly and be more manageable. This is a little sample diagram of what could work as a workflow. So step number 7, which is the tidying and cleaning up. Always assign cleaning tasks is a great way to empower the children and save time. Simply assign cleaning tasks to a few children and then rotate the schedule so that everybody gets a chance to have different tasks. And to create a workshop job chart with written or illustrated images of tasks, and indicate the names of the children before the workshop so that they know what's expected of them. So for example, here, this is an example of a cooking workshop job chart. So for example, these are the tasks that is expected, and you can indicate the name of the students here. It is best to complete before, so the child will know what is expected of him or her at the end of the workshop. Also, like I mentioned before, alternate the tasks among the children so that they don't always complete the same task all the time. Now we're moving on to the next section, which is planning the cooking workshop. So obviously the first thing is, after you've done your research, is you choose a recipe. When choosing a recipe, here are just a few things to consider. Obviously the duration of the workshop. Plan for enough time for the cleaning and tasting of the prepared recipe, making sure that you have the equipment that's available in good condition, the quantity of ingredients needed, and also consider the food cost. We can always refer to fact sheet number 3, which is tips for reducing food costs. Consider recipes requiring very little equipment. This will save time by having less dishes to wash and allows the use of basic equipment that is inexpensive. Cooking techniques suited to the child's age and skills. How to use the proper use of table knives and scissors to cut soft foods or herbs. Allergen-free ingredients. You can refer to fact sheet number 4 on food allergies, which provides a list of substitutions for common food allergens. And choose recipes that are easy to make at home. If it's too complicated, most likely they will not do it at home. And we also want to promote healthy eating, so you want to encourage the students to cook at home. So making it very simple for them is the best way to do it. And then you can increase the complexity of the recipe. Choose a variety of nutritious recipes, try different foods, introduce different tastes so that we're increasing knowledge of different foods and cooking techniques. There's also fact sheet number 6, which provides a list of a variety of recipe ideas. Layout type, what is the best suited for your group? Is it a more individual setting or a group recipe, which will be discussed a little bit on page 24. And what is the desired learning objective? Is it more technical? Is it more knowledge? Is it more exploring different food tastes? Whatever your idea is in terms of learning objective, you can also choose your recipe based on that. And also, it's very important to encourage students to be creative and involved. Sometimes you can ask the students in terms of what the theme, what kind of food they would like to try. And you can also suggest they prepare 2 versions of the same recipe. Always be careful with baking recipes because sometimes they're more difficult to improvise and change because it can alter the taste of the outcome of the recipe. So these are examples of the fact sheet number 4, which I mentioned. Fact sheet number 4, you can have a chance to read it on your own time. It gives substitutions of different food allergens. The next one, like I mentioned, is fact sheet number 6, choosing a variety of nutritious recipes. And it also gives us inspiring references that you can visit for different recipes as well. Here, when choosing recipes, again, keep in mind the targeted learning objectives. So you can actually indicate here, specific learning objectives, making sure that the recipe you've chosen matches the learning objective that you've chosen. And what are the specific skills or knowledge you want them to attain through this particular cooking workshop. The learning objectives are also outlined on page 22 or on fact sheet number 1, which you'll see on the next slide. This is fact sheet number 1, child development through cooking workshops. So cooking workshops, we found through scientific research and literature, can impact overall child development in very, very positive ways. Cognitive and language development, physical and motor development, social and moral development, where they get to chit-chat and share their experience, and also emotional development. And also, cooking workshops can also impact broader areas of learning and cross-curricular competencies that have been established by the Quebec Education Program, which can be adapted to meet your provincial education program as well. So you can read this on your own time and compare to your own provincial guidelines in terms of what is the expected competencies. Learning objectives for cooking workshops at elementary level, the targeted skills are also focused on preparation techniques, because when they know how to cook, they're more inclined to do so, and also on the sensory characteristics of food. Increased food knowledge, teaches how to plan, meal planning, finding recipes, how to budget, being conceptual, meaning being more creative with leftovers, adjusting recipes, being creative with ingredients, learning to cook different foods, proper preparation techniques, for example, cutting, chopping, dicing, developing sensory perception of food, example, the taste, the texture. And you can even take it further, like I said, encourage creativity, make 2 versions of the recipe, or suggest to the older children that they make their own version. What would they change? And you can get inspired by Cuisine en Famille digital cookbooks or schools take-home projects for some inspiration. Filling out the cooking workshop preparation tool, practical tool B. When cooking workshop calendar is filled out, we suggest the use of practical tool B, cooking workshop preparation tool, which is also on page 50 of the PDF guide for each workshop. And basically what this does is you want to simplify the steps of the recipe, prepare in advance maybe the material ingredients that are needed by the students, present a proper cooking technique to the students, allow sufficient time to prepare the recipe for cleanup and tasting of the foods, of the meals prepared. You can also maybe perhaps split the workshop over 2 days, depending on what the recipe is. Prepare some steps in advance if the recipe is longer. And you can simplify the preparation steps. For example, instead of saying cook the cut onions, you can say cut the onions and then cook them. So depending on your age, following these simple steps will facilitate the cooking process and the workflow of the cooking workshop. Other practical tips on this page is always use the same unit of measure, makes it more easy to follow, adjust the yield accordingly to the recipe, to the chosen layouts, or also the number of children. Determine if you need help, assistance, have a help of a co-worker, or pair younger children with older children. And some points to consider when designing the workshop layouts. If it's an individual recipe, each child makes their own recipe, and this is great because it allows the student to practice at every step of the cooking process. For example, allergen-free energy balls, an individual recipe, and each child will prepare their own portion. And you can use practical tool B to demonstrate what they need to do. Or it can also be a group recipe. The children prepare several servings together. The layout can be set up in smaller group options or production line option. Or a recipe can be divided into 4 steps, where each member of a team performs a single step. Making a group recipe encourages children to collaborate, to help one another, and it also allows the completion of recipes if some children have to leave before the completion of the recipe. On the next page is a visual representation, 2 examples of individual recipe, indicate the measurements directly on the container, so there's no confusion when the student needs to gather their ingredients. A group recipe, again, like mentioned before, in a group of 4, each student has a specific task of the recipe to complete. You can place the steps on a board in large writing for easy viewing. Not all students will perform the steps, but it's important to switch it up the next cooking workshop so every child experiences a different cooking task or different task. So this is an example of a cooking preparation tool. So this you can fill out with the recipe, the age group, duration. Sorry, just a second. Duration, the equipment that's needed, what purchasing to be done, and if there's any pre-activity preparation. The next page is really the recipe, the ingredients that's needed, specific instructions, demonstrations, the preparation, and any notes that you can take. For example, if there was any challenges, you can note them down here. You can keep them for a later time when it's time to evaluate the cooking recipe. This is a demonstration of how it's completed. So just a very quick overview of how to use these practical toolkit. So now we've completed section planning for the cooking workshop. We'll move on to step 2, the preparation phase. And this is pretty much ensures the necessary equipment, the purchases, the preparing the ingredients, sending reminders to parents, etc. So in the days leading up to the workshop. Okay, so ensure all necessary cooking equipment is available and in working condition. Ensure you have enough storage space for your ingredients. Make a shopping list so that you don't forget anything. Determine the amount that you need to buy based on the recipe and the number of participants. You can also consult grocery store flyers to keep costs down. You can also refer to fact sheet number 3, tips for keeping recipe costs down, also on page 1661 of the PDF guide, and send a reminder notice to parents. So reminding parents there's an upcoming workshop, they can either participate or making sure that they pick up their child at the end of the cooking workshop. So this is the fact sheet number 2, environmentally friendly cooking workshops, what to consider when choosing recipes as well. So when purchasing ingredients, opt for local or organic ingredients whenever possible. So for example, from September to November and even in May, June, it is very easy to propose recipes using local fruits and vegetables. For example, from quiterre with their baskets. If your school participates in the school state group project, you can order vegetable baskets and be used for cooking workshops, which is wonderful. In winter months, unfortunately, we can opt for more frozen fruits and vegetables, which could be just as nutritious as fresh. They have the advantage of being pre-cut, they're washed, easy to store and ready to use. So you can choose recipes, these themes, to explore different types of food, variety of breads and grain products, legumes and tofu. Some students might not be familiar with these kind of foods, and it's a great opportunity. It's a great teaching moment to learn the benefits, health benefits, and the ease of preparing recipes with these kind of foods. And carefully planning the choice of ingredients, handling leftovers, and choosing eco-friendly recipes before animating workshops is essential in applying the principles of recycling. So it's important to recycle, compost, and as much as possible avoid as much as possible food waste. So this gives you different guidelines, which you can read as well. So fact sheet number 3 is tips for keeping recipe costs down. Provide useful tips to increase the frequency of cooking workshops, because sometimes we're limited because of the budget. So if we can choose recipes and ingredients that keep the low cost, well then the frequency of the workshops can increase as well. And also choose recipes that are easily to prepare at home, so that parents are more likely to cook the same recipes with their children. So this gives substitutions of ingredients in order to keep the food costs down. On the day of the workshop, ensure the space is properly set up and safe. Prepare required equipment and the required ingredients needed to prepare. So depending on the image that I showed you just a few slides ago, is it a recipe that's individual or a group recipe? And of course, delegate duties. Assign tasks to students. When they know what they're doing, you're teaching them responsibility as well. And you can use, again, practical tool C, cooking workshop job chart, which can be filled out with the children before, and this way gives them an idea of what to expect at the end of the workshop. So now we completed step 2 of the preparation. We move on to step 3, which is the animating process. And here, this is the fun part. This is where we actually get to engage and have the students get their hands dirty. So at the start of the cooking workshop, greet the children with a smile, welcome them as they arrive, and this will establish a good rapport because we want the children to be happy and excited about cooking. Take attendance, and before we start, make sure that they're ready to go, which is washing their hands, rolling up their sleeves, tying up their hair, and getting ready to get their hands dirty, provided their hands are clean. Have an interactive workshop. Keep the children engaged. We know that working with children, it has to be fun and enticing, and it has to be fun. So it's always important to provide clear instructions on what is expected of them, demonstrate the proper way in a very fun way, and stimulate the child's interest by asking their cooking experience and what they enjoy about cooking. If they ever cook, these are some of the questions that you can ask. Do you ever cook at home? What do you like to cook? Depending on what they say, you can make sure that it becomes more positive more than negative if they don't like to cook. So review and prepare the recipe. So here's always fun facts. You can show a picture of the recipe so they know what to expect at the end. While introducing the ingredients of the recipe, while presenting an ingredient, share a fun fact about it. Where it originates from, how it's grown, how different cultures prepare it, and the role it plays in the recipe, if they've ever tried it. Present the cooking equipment needed for the workshop. You can ask the students what type of equipment is used to prepare certain tasks of the recipe. And the guide provides some examples of what you can read later on. Here, the next part is demonstrate the cooking techniques. Now, if it's younger kids who've never cut or shredded a carrot, it's important that you demonstrate. So by gathering the children around for a closer look, you can avoid them fiddling with the equipment during the demonstration. Providing these demonstrations to the children will also help them understand what to do at the necessary step. The more comfortable the children are with their cooking abilities, they lower the risk of accidents, getting injured, as well as the time needed for the preparation. Have the children prepare the recipe step by step. Again, take the time to demonstrate what is the technique if it's more complicated when it's needed. It's easier to manage the whole group this way, especially with younger children. When children are more independent, even when they're very young, they can be a very simple task. They can work their way up and become more experienced, and of course, avoid waiting. Anticipate that some children will finish sooner than others. So plan for enough time to complete the workshop. Plan activities or tasks for children who finish before the others. So you can help the children, for example, help the other children. They can jump to the next step of the recipe, or they can actually help prepare for the next day's cooking workshop. Finish the recipe for the children who have to leave partway through the workshop. Start cleaning. So just to make sure that the faster children or more faster went through these work are not always the ones doing what the cleaning, because then they get frustrated and they say we always get stuck doing the same thing. So it's important to vary the tasks. Now it's enjoying the food and conclude the workshop, which is also the best part of the cooking workshop. But before they get to taste the food, it's important that the children complete the cleaning tasks that was assigned to them. A good idea is to remind students that when all involved in the preparation of the workshop, as well as the cleaning, all can enjoy tasting the recipe that they worked so hard to prepare. So encourage all children without forcing. Some students might be reluctant. You encourage, you don't force. Try to find the food that they prepared and encourage them. And play a positive role by eating the food yourself with enthusiasm. While after tasting the food, start a conversation with the children. This promotes the development of social skills and strengthens their sense of belonging and assertiveness. You can see a list of suggested words for sampling on fact sheet number 7, which I'll demonstrate in a little bit, which is also provides useful vocabulary in describing food. Some leading questions can be, what part of the recipe did you find the easiest or the most difficult? Did you enjoy making the recipe? You can also have the students rate the recipe in an informal way. Who liked the recipe? Who didn't like the recipe? What would you change? And of course, always having a connection with the parents. Send the recipe to the parents, either through school webpage, school newspaper, or letters sent home to parents as well. It's very useful. And this is an example of useful vocabulary for cooking equipment. On the other side is cooking vocabulary or sampling vocabulary, which you can experiment with in order to help students identify or develop the sensory skills, characteristics of food. And now we've completed with the children as they arrive. And now we're looking at step 4, which is the evaluation process. Now here we're looking back. We review each workshop separately, all the workshop as a whole, and we analyze where it needs to be changed so that we can share it with our coworkers and make improvements for the following year. So at the end of the cooking workshop, evaluate the planning, preparation, and animation steps, analyze each step to identify if there were any problems or issues that you encountered, and obviously make the necessary improvements as needed. It is also important to hold on to your evaluations for each cooking workshop to help improve future ones and make the required adjustments or modifications. Evaluations can be reported on Practical Tool B, Cooking Workshop Preparation Tool. And at the end of the school year, when you evaluate, it's time to evaluate the annual planning, these are some of the questions that you can ask. Was it easy to implement the cooking workshop? What were the challenges? Was there enough space to animate? Enough for malfunctioning equipment? Was there enough budget? Was their frequency of the workshop sufficient or not enough? Were the recipes varied enough for the students? And keep a record of all your evaluations to improve future cooking workshops. And of course, keep all updated workshop tools so that all notes can be recorded. You may also debrief with coworkers about their experience, share advice, collect all notes and worksheets in a binder with separators of all recipes used in the cooking workshops that were assembled and tested. Organize them by month, type of recipe, age group, and this will save time and improve on organizing cooking workshops for the next year. In conclusion, so I just want to conclude that cooking workshops are very, very beneficial to children in many, many ways. First and foremost, they encourage children to adopt a healthy diet, an essential part of healthy lifestyle, which they can also contribute to the following: developing fine and gross motor skills, developing social skills such as helping each other, using cross-curricular and subject-specific competencies, work methods, cooperation, reading, writing, math, science. It's endless. Acquiring cooking skills, which will be useful for their future, creating repeated success and positive experiences with nutritious foods and dishes, experiencing joy of eating, developing a sense of taste. Sometimes kids, I don't like this certain food, but in tasting different foods, they develop a sense of taste and likeness for that particular food. Sparking curiosity and interest in trying different foods, developing self-esteem, strengthening a sense of belonging to the community. Also, it is important to mention the biggest benefits of cooking workshops is that children experience the joy of eating healthy foods. We always assume that healthy food doesn't taste good and it's boring. We want to remove the stigma. Healthy foods could be very delicious and very fun to eat, especially when you're preparing it with your own two hands. It develops a sense of pride and learning and developing and the ability to cook. These skills are essential and will positively impact their daily lives as they become adults one day. Children will also build a healthy and positive relationship with food and be able to appreciate the social, cultural, environmental, economic, and biological aspects of food. And cooking with them through cooking workshops, I think, is one of the best ways to achieve this. These are references and resources as well that I find is very, very useful. I hope today's session on the proper use of the guide was very, very beneficial and fruitful, and I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Juliana. Thanks to everyone. We got some questions. I know that one of the questions was to access the slides, and yes, sorry, I did not mention it, but the guide is available for download, and the link was sent like as an answer, so you can freely access and download the entire guide as PDF. Moreover, the webinar will be recorded and it will be online on quiterre website soon this week. And also, I've sent as an answer the email of Juliana's. So if people want to access specifically the presentation, it's just like the PDF, but with annotated comments. You can also write directly to her if you are interested. We do have, so it's time if you want to ask question, you can go to your question box and we will go over different questions. So the first one was is what criteria do you use to determine you are preparing a healthy recipe that promotes vegetables and fruits? Do you have criteria to review new recipes if someone proposed something different?
Well, usually we always try to focus on more whole foods. So if it's a recipe that's highlighting, fruits and vegetables with little amount of added salt or sugar, would be okay, would meet the criteria. We've also provided many, many references and resources that can provide different recipes that you can refer to. when choosing your themes or different recipes. But when it comes to choosing recipes, if the main focus, the main food groups in terms of food is fruits and vegetables, whole grain, minimally processed foods, then it's a go in terms of it being a healthy recipe.
Yes, and I will add to this that today was released the new Canadian food guide,
Yes.
and it was basically what you said also, like a lot of principle towards that, and also one of the principle is to increase also culinary skills.
Yeah.
So I think that this webinar and this guide is pretty will be pretty useful for that too.
And it's also in terms of technique, when you're talking about fresh fruits and vegetables, it's also an opportunity for kids to learn their technical and motor skills. So when it comes to technique and improving it, this is a great way to do it, because you're teaching them how to bite, how to choose, how to select, properly washing, properly storing. So it's multifaceted in terms of what is involved when it comes to cooking, and also manipulation of food.
Yeah, sure.
So, and we know that as raw as possible, fresh food, whole grain products are very nutritious.
Yeah, thanks. If we go to another question,
yes.
The other question what is the content of the fundraising basket? Maybe I can answer to that, because the fundraising campaign was another part of this big project. So the project has two parts. One was the fundraising campaigns, and the other one was actually this guide, the practical guide. So this webinar focused on really the culinary workshop guide, but I will send you the page that describe all the fundraising campaigns, but basically it's a basket of local and organic fruits and vegetables that are in season, and usually those campaigns are run during fall, so between mid-October to mid-November. So we think to the vegetables that are available at this time of the year, so mainly like carrots, onions, potatoes, beets, etc. So I can send you the link and you'll have all the information concerning that. If I take another question, the guide is available in French, so yes. If you go to our website, I put also the link to this page right after, right in a few minutes. Also we hosted a French webinar last week, so the webinar is already online in French, so you can go and listen to it also. Another question, what do you recommend for hand washing and washing food in a classroom where there is not a double sink?
Well, ideally it's a double sink, but that's not realistic in most schools. Usually if there's no sink in the classroom, usually what ends up happening, I know we've experienced this in our schools when we've animated workshops, we go to the staff room and use their kitchens to pre-wash them, and so when the students arrive, it's washed. If there's no sink for them to wash their hands, and then we encourage all the students to visit a washroom to properly wash their hands. We demonstrate what is the proper technique. Usually we even show a video of the proper way of hand washing, and then we have the students go to the washroom to properly wash their hands.
Great. What do you sell it for? I guess this means for the fundraising campaign. It's basically fundraising campaigns that are run for schools in order to fund their different activities, and we encourage people, because sometimes doing culinary workshop in schools requires some money in order to purchase food or equipment. So the fundraising campaign is a way to raise money in order to have and animate and host more culinary workshops.
So the more baskets you sell, then you have more money coming back to animate, to purchase food, ingredients, or equipment.
Exactly.
And you can start with the simplest equipment, the simplest recipes that requires less equipment, so that you can budget in terms of how much you can allocate to the ingredients and the purchase of equipment.
And I just put the link for the school state route fundraising campaigns. I just sent it as an answer, so you can see all those details. I don't see more questions for now. Is there other questions that are more specifically on the practical guide. What is the average number of students in the cooking classes? Who teach them?
It depends. It could vary. It could be a classroom of 25, or it could be it depends on the daycare. If it's done in a daycare setting, it depends. If it's done in the classroom, we've done workshops with a group of 25. It's just really planning the workflow. So usually, like depending on the number, you can use. I made reference to different workflows, layouts of different ways of setting it up so that you can facilitate. It also depends on the age of your students. So if they're older, it's easier that the students can maybe prepare their own recipe, or maybe as a group recipe. So it really varies on your group, and it varies on the type of recipe as well. But it could work. Great.
I do have another question. How do you manage teaching knife skill with younger children and only one teacher?
Yes. So usually if you can have someone help you, but before you do the cooking workshop, maybe it can be done the day before, and just so that it doesn't take up much time in terms of when you're doing animated cooking workshop. It could be done before, 5 minutes before. It can be done the day before so that they know how to use it. And maybe practice with a plastic knife, something that they don't hurt themselves, so that they have an idea. And then when it's actually coming to the cooking workshop, then you can actually use a knife. If you feel that it's really not safe, you can pre-cut the vegetables before. You can use frozen vegetables or frozen fruit. So it all really depends on how you assess your group of children. And then you can make the right decision to ensure their safety.
And also in the guide, there's this section where there is a calendar, and there's some techniques that are already identified. And on the recipe cards, we also added some tools in order to teach different techniques. And I think it's for the cucumber, or there's one especially on how do we teach with knives and skills.
Because those are the things that we need to really teach the children, because part of cooking is part of chopping and dicing. So these needs to be done properly and safely. And then as we get more à l'aise, more comfortable with it, then you're more likely to have students that are not as nervous. Mm-hmm. And sometimes maybe you can have, if you don't have one teacher, sometimes you can have parent volunteers. It all depends on your situation. If it's in a classroom setting, daycare maybe not, because the parents are working. But if it's a classroom setting where during the day, I know we've had parents come in and help, especially with the younger kids. So it all depends on your situation, what's available to you. But those are the techniques that we suggest, and we can provide the suggestions in the guide as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there other questions? Comments? Well, I guess this make it. So thank you very much, everyone. As I said, you will have this recorded webinar that it will be available online, and you can download the guide as PDF at the link that we gave on the ANIMATING website. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Have a good day.